All right, good afternoon. I will start off with the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and just to let you know that tomorrow our guest will be Viviane van de Peer, the Deputy Special Representative for the Secretary General and Deputy Head of the Mission in the Congo, and she's currently in Goma, and she will brief you live virtually from Goma on the latest situation. In the meantime, what I can tell you is that our Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator for the DRC, Bruno Lemarquis, called today for the urgent reopening of the airport in Goma. Mr. Lemarquis stressed that the airport is a lifeline and that the survival of thousands of people depends on its reopening to facilitate evacuation of injured people, delivery of medical supplies, and arrival of humanitarian reinforcements. Our OCHA colleagues tell us that thousands of civilians are still on the move in and around Goma. Figures remain difficult to verify, but reports indicate significant numbers of people have left displacement sites along the Kanyaruncinya road and moved towards the area of Rutshuru. Other displaced people are also moving towards the Minova area. Hundreds of thousands of people remain displaced, living in displacement sites or with host communities in North Kivu, including on the Goma-Sake axis, where a large number of displaced people remain in displacement sites. OCHA and its partners have been visiting displacement sites outside Goma over the last several days to assess conditions. These efforts are ongoing. Turning to the Middle East, Tom Fletcher, our emergency relief coordinator and head of the Department of Humanitarian Affairs, is continuing his visit to Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory. Today, he was in Nir Oz in southern Israel, where 1/4 of all residents were killed or taken hostage during the Hamas terror attacks on 7th of October. On a social media post, Mr. Fletcher stressed that the ceasefire must hold, that all civilians must be protected, and that all hostages must be freed. He also held several meetings with Israeli officials last night and again today. They discussed ways to sustain the surge of humanitarian support to Gaza, as well as the ongoing challenges in the West Bank that we've been reporting. As of earlier today, we and our humanitarian partners estimate that more than 565,000 people have crossed from the south of Gaza to the north since 27th of January. More than 45,000 people have been observed moving from the north to the south. Meanwhile, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that we and our partners are working to mitigate the impact of the widespread destruction of critical water, sanitation, and hygiene infrastructure that has taken place throughout the Gaza Strip. Some 40 new water points have already been established over the past week, and partners are now trucking water to about 272 different water points throughout the Strip. 272 water points throughout North Gaza Governorate alone. And through that, they were able to deliver more than 1,000 cubic meters of safe drinking water and nearly 900 cubic meters of domestic water to about 177,000 people each day. To address the water shortage, our colleagues at UNOPS, the UN Office for Project Services, delivered some 40,000 liters of fuel to Gaza City yesterday to power water pumps and facilitate trucking. And we hope to have the executive director of UNOPS brief you on the situation in Gaza next week. Meanwhile, the World Food Program is also expanding fuel storage capacity in the Gaza Strip. Efforts are also ongoing to dispatch water pipes purchased by UNICEF to northern Gaza to prevent key facilities from overflowing before it rains. We also have an update for you on the winter response in Gaza. Between Thursday and Sunday, our partners distributed tarpaulins and winter clothing to more than 2,000 households in northern Gaza. And in southern Gaza, 10,000 tarpaulins were distributed between the 25th of January and the 2nd of February, with an additional 200 tarpaulins distributed in the Gaza Governorate. Over the past 2 days, our humanitarian partners also distributed 600 tarpaulins to 300 households in the Khan Yunis area. On Syria, just want to flag a particular situation in eastern Aleppo, and I can tell you that we condemn the horrendous attack that claimed the lives of 20 people, mostly women, in the city of Manbij. That took place yesterday, and it occurred when a car bomb exploded near a vehicle transporting women to lands where they were working as seasonal agricultural workers. According to reports we've received, 13 other women and 5 children were also wounded, some in critical condition. Only this last weekend, another incident occurred that claimed the lives of at least 4 civilians in a car bomb in the city and injured 9 others. 6 children were among those injured or casualties. We reiterate that all parties must uphold their obligations under international humanitarian law to protect civilians. Civilians and civilian infrastructure should never be targeted. On the humanitarian front, we and our partners continue to provide assistance to scale up our assessment and monitoring mission where security conditions permit. Our colleagues at OCHA tell us that as of yesterday, a cross-border mission was completed between Turkey and Idlib to assess cash distribution system. So far in 2025, we've completed 40 cross-border missions to Syria, mostly to monitor and assess projects, nearly double the number of missions that we had at the same time last year. Last week, on 30 January, OCHA also led missions to Suweda Governorate in the southwest of Syria to engage with caretaker authorities and assess the situation at the National Hospital there. The mission also reveals that water for drinking and agricultural purposes is a major need due to increased drought over the years. This was the first UN mission to this city since October of 2023. Turning to Sudan, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us they remain extremely concerned over the continued mass displacement of civilians from El Fasher, the capital of North Darfur State, due to escalating violence since April of last year. Over the past 10 months, more than 600,000 human beings have fled to El Fasher and other localities in North Darfur to seek safety, and that's what the International Organization for Migration is telling us. In recent weeks, attacks have been reported across much of El Fasher and surrounding areas, including in the Abu Shouk displacement camp, the Saudi hospital, and the western area of the town. As we noted yesterday, famine conditions were confirmed in Abu Shouk camp in December and are expected to persist through May of this year. In a statement issued just a short while ago, the Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator in Sudan, Clementine Nkweta Salami, condemned the relentless and intensifying shelling and air and drone strikes against civilians in Darfur and Kordofan and other conflict-affected areas. She said this is not warfare, but a ruthless assault on human life. OCHA is also alarmed by escalating hostilities in South Kordofan amid fighting between the Sudanese army and the Sudan People's Liberation Movement North. In the state capital, Kadugli, more than 50 people were reportedly killed yesterday, mostly women and children, following a series of airstrikes. Over 24 were also injured. As hostilities continue across the country, civilians there also face the threat of explosive remnants of war. Last week, 2 children were killed by unexploded ordnance in Gereda in South Darfur State. That's what local humanitarian colleagues are telling us. This year, more than 13 million people in Sudan need support to address the threats of explosive hazards, but funding for response remains limited. OCHA also stresses that under international humanitarian law, parties to the conflict have a clear obligation to refrain from directing attacks against civilians and civilian objects, including vital infrastructure. They must take constant care to spare them, whether they're carrying out attacks or defending against them. Meanwhile, in Libya, our colleague at the UN Support Mission in Libya announced the establishment of the Advisory Committee as part of its multi-track political initiative announced to the Security Council in December of last year. The role of the Advisory Committee will be to develop technically sound and politically viable proposals for resolving outstanding contentious issues to enable the holding of elections, building on existing Libyan framework and laws. The Advisory Committee is composed of Libyan personalities who've been identified on basis of the UN's own assessment of their experience and capabilities. The advisory committee is not a decision-making body or a dialogue forum. It is time-bound and is expected to finish its work in a short time frame. The proposals that they will formulate will be submitted to the UN mission for consideration for the subsequent phase of the political process. The advisory committee will hold its first meeting next week in the capital, Tripoli. And coming back to crossing the ocean, coming back here, or at least to this side of the world, our colleagues at the political mission in Haiti have released their latest human rights report, which covers the period from October to the end of December. According to them, at least 1,732 people were killed and over 400 people injured as a result of gang violence, as well as by self-defense groups or police operations. This brings the total number of people killed to 5,626 last year and over 2,200 people injured. The report renews its concern over the continued rape and sexual exploitation of women and girls by gang members. Our colleagues are also concerned about the recruitment of children by gangs, as we've been telling you. And obviously, the gangs also continue to control free movement of people and vehicles on the made roads leading in and out of the area of Port-au-Prince. In the face of these abuses and human rights violations, our colleagues say the authorities have taken timid steps to combat impunity, and several legal proceedings have been initiated to combat corruption, but they add that no action by the judicial authorities have been recorded as of the end of last year to seek accountability following the massacres that we told you about, both in Wharf Jérémie and Port-Sondé. That report is online. And going back to the other side of the world, to the other side of the Atlantic, we issued a statement earlier this morning in which the Secretary General expressed his sadness upon learning of the death of Horst Köhler, the former president of the Federal Republic of Germany. Former President Köhler was a champion of the United Nations. He was deeply committed to global partnerships, sustainable development, and creating new perspectives for youth in Africa. He served as the Secretary General's personal envoy for Western Sahara from 2017 to 2019, during which time he sought to help resolve the long-standing conflict there. The Secretary General extends his sincere condolences to his family, as well as to the government and people of Germany. And turning to Ukraine, the Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator there, Matthias Schmale, has condemned today's deadly missile attack that hit an administrative building in the town of Izum in the Kharkiv region in the east of Ukraine. The attack caused dozens of casualties, with several civilians killed and scores more injured, including children. That's what local authorities are telling us. Following the strike, humanitarian partners immediately responded, providing legal and psychosocial support to the impacted people for distributing shelter materials to cover damaged buildings. Other regions of Ukraine saw hostilities today and yesterday, which killed or injured civilians and caused damage to homes and civilian infrastructure. In the early hours of this morning, a drone struck civilian areas in Kyiv and Cherkasy city in central Ukraine, though fortunately no casualties were reported. We, along with our partners, continue to provide critical support to communities in the front line of the conflict. Today, 2 interagency convoys delivered humanitarian supplies to Mirnora town in the Donetsk region and Stanislav village in the Kherson region, where access has been very limited. These 2 communities suffer from daily shelling and have no access to basic services such as electricity, heating, and water supplies. Aid workers brought generators, medical items, hygiene kits, thermal blankets, and solar lamps. Today is the International Day of Human Fraternity. You can all hold hands. In a message, the Secretary General said that on this day we celebrate the values of equality, unity, and mutual respect. We are one human family, he emphasizes, rich in diversity, equal in dignity and rights, and united in solidarity. Speaking of solidarity, 2 more countries on the list. You guys ready? Yeah. All right. One from a member state in South Asia, and the other from an island country in the Central Pacific. Now, the difference is that the highest peak of this island country in the South Pacific is 285 meters, and the highest peak in the country in South Asia is 8,848 meters.
That's Nepal.
Nepal, yes?
Sri Lanka.
No, no, not Sri Lanka. The capital of that country is Tarawa, which is the capital of
No,
what?
no.
No, Kiribati. All right, 37 fully paid up. Benno,
I have
You
a
won?
question, but it should not be the first one, so.
all right, Edie.
Thank you, Steph. Going back to Congo, can you tell us whether the UN is now saying that M23 is in total control of Goma? And with this ceasefire, what's happened to their offensive trying to take Bukavu? Has it stalled there? Have they pulled back?
We don't have any reports of the M23 moving closer to Bukavu, though we do have some reports of heavy fighting with the Congolese armed forces. I think what we're seeing is the M23 in effective control and having consolidated its control over Goma.
So where is this fighting taking place? In South Kivu?
Yes, in South Kivu is what we're seeing. Jordan.
Thank you. Just happening that I have another 4 tiny questions.
Well, let's do 2, and then we'll take a Jordan pause like we do with Edie, and then I'll come back to you.
Okay. The first one is clarification, because you said Mr. Fletcher went to Israel and Palestinian occupied territories. I remember last year when Mr. Abbas was here, you issued a statement. You said Mr. Guterres met with the president of the state of Palestine. What's the difference between Palestinian occupied territories or Palestine, or the state of Palestine occupied?
Well, I mean, Mr. Abbas and his representatives here are accredited with the language they're accredited. I was just referring to the geographic place, and I mentioned that yesterday. He was in Ramallah. Your next question.
My next question, there is a war in Jenin. And I think the Security Council will meet at 3 o'clock to discuss in a close consultation. Do you know who's going to brief from the Secretariat?
Yes, there will be, as far as I understand, Ms. Cog, who's the special coordinator for the Middle East peace process, and Tom Fletcher was scheduled to brief in close consultations. We'll confirm that. As for the situation in Jenin, the West Bank, we've been updating that almost on a regular basis. Tony.
Shukran, Steph. President Donald Trump is set to issue an executive order today withdrawing the U.S. from the UN Human Rights Council and prohibiting future funding for UNRWA. What's the UN and the Secretary General position on this?
Look, we'll obviously see what is being signed, right? But the U.S. will take the decision that it takes. It doesn't alter our position on the importance of the Human Rights Council as part of the overall human rights architecture within the United Nations. And on UNRWA, I'm not sure that's something that's very new. I mean, and again, it doesn't alter our commitment to supporting UNRWA in its work and in its work of delivering critical services to Palestinians under its mandate. Okay. Oh, Benno. I mean, I'm not going to stand there in silence too long, so go ahead.
Yes. The El Salvadorian president offered to the United States to outsource parts of their prison system. President Bukele said that he would take prisoners from the United States for a fee. Incarceration seems to be a rather unusual business model, and maybe you have an opinion about
Look,
this.
again, I think we've seen these sorts of agreements between two countries of housing migrants or people it wants to detain. our concern, as with all of these agreements that we've seen, is to ensure that the rights of these human beings are not violated, and that their rights as asylum seekers are not violated, and their basic human rights are not violated.
And just to be clear here, it's not about migrants or so. It seems to be about U.S. citizens.
I think
That
I
should be
think, listen, I
transferred
think
to somewhere else.
those details will have to be looked at. Edith Lederer.
Thank you, Steph. On your, on supporting UNRWA, can you tell us whether you did your daily checks today and what the situation
I did do my
is?
daily check, and the answer was nothing out of the ordinary to report. Okay, Jordan, we'll go to the second half, and then we'll go to Evelyn.
Again, back on Mr. Fletcher's visit to Palestine and Israel, you mentioned also that he asked for the release of all hostages. That's what you mentioned, right?
If you paid attention, I paid attention, yes. Okay.
Did he also discuss with the Israeli side the release of all prisoners, which is almost 10,000 in Israeli jail? Did he discuss?
I don't know if that specific issue was discussed. I know the bulk of his discussions with the foreign ministry and with COGAT was about the immediate humanitarian issues. Our position on the administrative detainees that we see in Palestine remains unchanged, and we've asked for their release.
And the last one?
Yep.
Jordan is sending aid to Gaza through road almost every other day or every week. Does the UN have any role in distribution those materials? Or not?
I do not know, but I can try to find out for you. Evelyn.
Thank you. Is there any, in Syria, for the bombing and the attacks on women, was there any motive given of why it was
No,
done?
it's not clear to us, according to the reports that we have, who is responsible for this and why it happened, though, as if there could be any excuse or pretext for doing such a thing.
Right, and in Ukraine, the strikes against civilians seem to be picking up again. Can we say that it's the Koreans, the Russians, militia? Can you identify the bad guys?
I would leave that analysis to journalists. Okay. Yes, please, go ahead. And then I think Miriam has a question online.
Thank you, Steph. So I have a question about U.S. stopping their foreign aid. I think you mentioned that you're going to provide examples of impact on the UN system and organs. So I just want to know whether it's prepared, ready, or not.
I mean, some examples, I think, in terms of examples, our colleague from UNFPA, P.O. Smith, gave a rather lengthy and granular example in the Geneva briefing today, which you have the transcript of, but of immediate impact, notably on Afghan refugees in Pakistan, on women in Afghanistan, to name a few. In terms of Haiti, we received an official notification from the U.S. Asking for an immediate stop work order on their contribution to the multinational security support force. So that's two immediate impacts. Yes, what I can tell you is that the U.S. had committed $15 million to the trust fund. 1.7 million of that had already been spent, so 13.3 million is now frozen.
So do you have to give that back?
No, right now it's just frozen. Okay. All right, Miriam.
Hi, thank you, Steph. Couple of questions on Afghanistan. As you know, Sirajuddin Haqqani travel exemption was issued by the Security Council Sanction Committee for 10 days so he can go perform Umrah in Saudi. Do you know who requested this request to the Sanctions Committee at the Security Council? Was it the UN, UNAMA, or like was it?
I don't know. We can put you in touch with that specific. I can put you in touch with somebody on that specific issue, and we can try to get an answer.
Okay. Also, about the attack on UNAMA, do you have any more information that you can share with us?
Not more than yesterday. I think they were looking at trying to investigate the issue. I have not gotten an update today, unfortunately.
Okay, another one on UNHCR in Pakistan. So many people, I talked to several refugees in Islamabad. They are saying that UNHCR in Islamabad completely closed and shut their offices, and they are not accepting people even to answer their questions. Do you have any information or updates on that?
On that particular case, no, but we will ask our UNHCR colleagues.
Thank you.
Thank you. No Sharon today. Thank you.